So, just a word of note up here at the moment. Since we're dealing with the crisis, the schools are out, and everyone is more or less, told to work from home. That means there are kids around, stomping around and making a lot of noise. And unfortunately, I may not be able to edit all of that out. I'm sure this is happening with a lot of people, including, professional news personalities working from home to all types of YouTubers and podcasters trying to keep up their programming while dealing with the fact that everybody is home, right? And making lots of noise. So hopefully they don't make too much noise in this particular video. But in any event, as things have gone on, there are a lot of stuff that gets missed or swept under the rug, as everyone is focused on Voldemort in order to avoid YouTube's, censorship deals. And one of the things that has gone on here is this particular story. A male student expelled even though there was no evidence of sex is fighting to clear his name. So the issue goes, a male student at Syracuse University is trying to clear his name after the school's investigation into sexual allegations failed to allow him to properly defend himself. The two students entered John's room at about 12:30 in the morning. The two, according to court documents, awoke in the same bed the next morning, fully clothed, and had no memory of what occurred the night before. After John was expelled, he filed a lawsuit against the school alleging his due process and Title IX rights were violated. He also sued the accuser for defamation because she called him a rapist online to his friends, even though there was no evidence the two even had sex. Jane tried to get the lawsuit dismissed, but the judge denied her motion. All right, so this is an instance that the Me Too movement has gone way too far and has really expanded the definition of what sexual assault or harassment or, what Me Too even means. When it first came out, it was to talk about those who were victims of rape. Then it was to talk about victims of, sexual harassment. Now, because we have a culture that itemizes victimhood, to get your 15 minutes of fame, everyone is trying to find ways in order to try and claim they're a victim. Now, keep in mind here, in this particular situation, they're both saying that they didn't recall what happened the night before. She doesn't remember. He doesn't remember. So it's interesting that in the culture, there's such a double standard whereby women have no responsibility and for their own decisions and conduct, but men are supposed to be responsible for anything, even if they are both equally intoxicated and things are consensual. So the Me Too movement has expanded over time to include scenarios in which women regret the decision afterwards, where they've gone through, they said yes, they consented, they had sex, and maybe it's because either it was a setup to begin with, or because, afterwards she feels bad, maybe feels too much like, a runaround Sue to try and keep this family friendly, or maybe it was due to disappointment and poor performance, whatever the case is, decides to change her mind after the fact, and somehow after the fact, it can now be considered rape. It was consensual while it was happening, but if you regret it afterwards, boom, all of a sudden that consensual sex is now defined as rape. Well, in this particular situation, the Me Too movement is now going off to be defined as not even having sex. It's two people laying fully clothed next to each other is now being considered a Me Too moment and instance of rape. Now, what would cause someone to go out and claim that they were raped when there was no sexual interaction whatsoever? Like I said, in this particular scenario, all the evidence is showing that, from their own recollection, that they went back to his place and they fell asleep next to each other, fully clothed. So now this gets into the whole Me Too movement and its effect on men, because this is destroying men's lives, and these men are innocent. I mean, they're just having their lives destroyed for no reason because somebody is wanting their 15 minutes of fame. And the schools, because, for whatever reason, is going, oh, we'll just believe all women. So rape is now defined not by a particular action, but by how someone feels about it later. It's all feeling, it's all subjective. And you wonder why it is that dating in 2020, at least in, far left states, involves signing consensual contracts with each other before having sexual intercourse. Oh yes, there is nothing more romantic than, in the heat of the moment, taking a pause, pulling a piece of paper out and go, can you sign this agreeing to all the terms and conditions before we have sexual intercourse? Right? And here's the list of what is and isn't allowed as we progress. Seriously, that's how we've come as a culture. And of course, as a result, there's been a rise and surge in popularity of people paying $10,000 for a sex robot. Geez, I can't imagine why. But of course, people are trying to say sex robots are included in the Me Too movement, so maybe that's not even safe. But when is the situation considered going too far? At what level can we say that this is completely and totally ridiculous, right? Where you don't even have to have sex, where if you even fall asleep in the same room as someone of the opposite sex, you can now claim that you were raped and the person is a rapist, even if you were always 10 feet apart the entire time. When does this get ridiculous? And when are we going to stand up as a culture and say, hey, you know what? Men's lives do matter and they shouldn't be destroyed because, some woman is seeking her 10 or 15 minutes of fame, or because she doesn't want to have to deal with the responsibilities of her own decisions, or, for whatever reasons, maybe a year ago he made a comment that she didn't like and now is seeking revenge. At what point do we now start holding women accountable for reporting false allegations, absurd allegations, and blatantly fake allegations? Because as women are doing this, it is directly harming those who are actual victims of actual rape. Because as more fake reportings continue, it makes it that much harder to believe real women who have been raped when they come out and talk about how they were raped. We're going to go, yeah, we've already heard all this before. This sounds very familiar. This is just, it becomes easier to just blow it off. And why is it that only women can claim rape? Why isn't it that, men, why isn't this guy able to come off and say, she was the one who raped me, right? I mean, there's just as much evidence that she raped him as there is of him raping her, and as far as her allegations go. So why is there such a double standard about it? There's a double standard there, and men are just victims to the whims of anyone looking for fame. And so this needs to stop. We need to stand up as a culture and say there needs to be harsh punishment for women who are out there making false allegations and ridiculously absurd allegations, so that we can protect the women who are actual victims, right? So what's your thoughts? Should this woman face more than a defamation lawsuit? Should she face actual criminal proceedings for filing a false report? Because you can't claim rape if you weren't actually raped.